Hi everyone, welcome to the next smug and empty chapter of TEDxLondon. I haven't decided which I'll be, but I'll see which avenue the talk takes me on. My name's Stanhope, and I'd like to introduce the stars of the talk, my grandmother and my great auntie Jenny. A picture taken in a little village of Leicestershire in the summer of 1943, a year when the Germans had lost at Stalingrad and the Italians were surrendering at the war, but mostly pretty quiet in the Leicestershire countryside. And just before my gran passed away, we spent a lot of time together around old photos and family stories, and it was some of the most precious, intimate, mutually enjoyable time that we spent together. And like most people in situations, it made me wish I'd done it sooner and more often. But it also left me with some things that have fed into my work in a really interesting way, an important way to me. This picture she loved. It came with a story that she shared often. As I said, it was taken in the summer of 1943. Her and her sister Jenny were working as land girls. And just after this picture was taken, a young man drove along the road behind, and his eye was so caught by these pretty land girls, and no doubt by my gran's outrageously short skirt for the 1940s, he crashed into the ditch. And in my gran's last days, I think she was pretty pleased to tell me that she had some devastating good looks in her day. And what this represented was a conversation across very different generations, a chance to understand each other's lives better. Often those intergenerational relationships can be so contrived and so much obligation surrounding them, but this was a kind of neutral, mutually enjoyable and rewarding time that we spent together. So first of all, this idea of old historical content, videos, pictures, stories, being a kind of glue across generations. But also, that was one part of what I kind of got from this. The other part was the idea of a history of a particular place, and the kind of fascinating, mind-boggling idea that every spot on the planet has this vast column of history that extends beneath it, or in front of it, or behind it, or whichever direction it goes in. Just this space here, just this building, these spots have the most amazing column of history. From 1847, trains came in and were turned around. Then 120 years later, it was the spot where the Doors played their only UK gig in 1968. Then 1972, the famous Greasy Truckers Party. In 2009, Bob Dylan played here. So this spot is a perfect example of one location on the planet having this incredible, stretching, rich history running out from behind it. Coming back to this field, which was a spot that didn't mean a huge amount to me before this story, it started a process of me finding out more about the history of that place. So I started more conversations with neighbors and with people that had moved into and away from the village. This was a road running behind that field, a picture also taken in the 1940s, a time when you could park and walk on the road, which you certainly can't on the A5 now. This was a lady 10 years before that sitting next to the road on a Sunday afternoon, again something you wouldn't be able to do now. This is a young boy 10 years before that in the 1920s, learning to ride on that road. This is zooming forward 20 years after the picture of my gran was taken, of someone driving down that road, that A5 road with its own rich history, called Watling Street, one of the first Roman roads. Just as you go along here, you reach High Cross with Fossway, another very, very rich point on our planet. And what all of these conversations represented were pins on a map, a collection, a community-created archive of memory of those particular places. But actually, the map didn't look like this. And one of the first things we explored was how actually, if you're collecting this content, the maps need to look a bit more like this. You have to add a fourth dimension. This one broken up into decades, fairly large chunks, and the idea being that obviously you could make it more granular. And the more history that is recorded and remembered from a particular spot, the more granular that fourth dimensional map would be. The other thing we explored doing was how you inject life into this historical content. You all work with young people and you stick in a black and white photo on the wall and it doesn't necessarily buzz with energy. It doesn't have a gravity about it necessarily. But there are things you can do, there's ways you can treat this content to inject some of that energy into it. One of the things we've been experimenting with is the idea of overlaying old photos onto their modern equivalent backdrops, which suddenly makes it feel part of a place that may mean more to your life than just the idea of an historic photograph. A few people have been doing this in really interesting ways now, and it really opens up the idea of placing history within the real world, placing history within a world that we spend every day in, that our students spend every day in, and that can bring it home to us in a more interesting way. So the next thing that we did was look at how you might be able to scale up these two things. A, for the purpose of multiplying the kind of conversations I had with my grandma and the local people in my area, and that people have all the time. The first way that we explored doing that was via dynamic mapping tools. So this is an example from our Historypin project about the idea of creating a dynamic mapping tool that allows you to jump to any particular location at any particular date and draw up all the content, the pictures, the videos, the memories, the stories that have been linked to that particular point at that particular time. And obviously giving you the possibility to be able to jump anywhere in time at any moment. The second thing that we explored around the scaling up of this idea was allowing people to overlay historic pictures onto street view backdrops. So again, creating a canvas for placing history within its real location in the real world. These are the streets of Greenwich Village in New York, and presents us and our students and the people we work with the opportunity to dive into a street they recognize and open a window into the history that they don't or that they didn't, and have a different, more tangible, more intimate relationship with that history. And perhaps ultimately allow you to drop into any street corner in the world, like this one on the corner of Elizabeth Street in Lonsdale in Melbourne, Australia, and flick through a whole series of stages of that particular street corner's history, evolving into the picture that you recognize today. So this opens up so many different types of possibilities, and we've been exploring them like mad. One is obviously around using mobile technology, so the idea of allowing people to carry this mini time machine around in their pockets, point it at something and draw out historical content that relates to that particular location. To see the sights and sounds and add your own sights and sounds. History is continuing every day, and if you perhaps bring to life through technology like this the concept that history continues into our everyday lives and moments in our current lives can be captured and added to this communal archive, then again it becomes closer rather than further away. So what next with this? We're exploring all sorts of other ways of injecting more life into this content, something we're calling moving comparative mapping, where you've got video content and it relates to a pin that moves along a map fairly slowly in this particular instance, and you've got a comparative video of that particular movie as well. Then also the idea of being able to go from the outside of a building, like this town hall in Reading, and then select that building and move inside the building. So the idea of taking this exploration of history from public spaces into private spaces, where again you can explore the sights and sounds, not smells yet, but perhaps in a few years' time, the sounds and signs of a particular building. Again, making history an immersive experience rather than a kind of standoffish, distant experience. So the most important bit of this from day one has been the role that schools play in taking center stage within their community as the organizations, the institutions that are perfectly equipped to reach out to their communities and gather people in, to record and to digitize and to pin and to interview and to capture all of these rows of these columns of history and all of the places that are relevant. This is a wonderful example of an event that's been going on in a wonderful school in Billericay, the Billericay School in Essex, and an example of a passionate teacher taking this idea and equipping her students to go out into the community and invite people in and to capture their memories, to spend time together where there's value on one side in the technical knowledge of how to scan and digitize and pin, and there's value on the other side in terms of the wisdom of the memories and the recollections that the gatekeepers in terms of the older people have. So the most important bit of this is obviously scale. We now have millions of people coming to look at Historypin and tens of thousands of participants. We need billions of people looking and millions of participants. So my pledge is that we want to help every school that is possible help us build this TARDIS, help us build this time machine, help us put themselves at the center of their communities. If you'd like to join us, you're very welcome. Thank you very much.